here today. I don't know what we're going to do here today just yet, but one thing I don't want to do here is do anything in the Deep Space Mining Company for right now. I feel like that's pretty much on lockdown, and we're pretty much... We've pretty much got what we want there. So I'd like to do a new game. I don't know if I usually default to playing career mode, right? And that's great for a more long play series. We might be better off for a one-off stream here to do either science or sandbox mode. I don't know. What do you guys think? Any opinions? Anything at all? While we're waiting on that, there's going to be a little bit of stream delay here. While we're waiting on that, we can talk about some difficulty things. I usually leave this on default. I think this is reasonably fine. But realistically, there is one more thing that I wanted to do. As long as we're at the main menu and waiting, I want to go into settings and I want to remap numpad period, because that's been causing me some issues when I'm typing in specific things into the maneuver nodes that hides the nav ball. So I would like to find, let's see, that would maybe be under game? Increase time warp? Yeah. I want keypad period. Okay. I want to just clear that assignment. There's no reason to actually have that. So that'll be fine. We'll apply that, and we will head on back. So we'll just accept. Fantastic. Okay, so it looks like nobody really... A little jewel exploration? We could do that, and I definitely didn't just open up the KSP forum by accident. Yeah, we could do that. If we're going to do a jewel exploration, then I definitely think that should be sandbox, because that would take a lot to unlock the parts for that. So we could just do a default sandbox start here, and we could do some Jewel exploration. What kind of missions would you be interested in seeing around at Jewel? That's something that we could definitely look at. So we're going to pop open a sandbox game here just so that we don't have to unlock everything. I've done that a million times. So we'll hop into the VAB here. And, well, actually, hopping into the VAB isn't super helpful until we know where exactly we want to go. So we could then hop into the tracking station and just take a look here. Yep, I'm aware of how the tracking station works. And zoom all the way out to Jewel, and then come on in here. So this is the Jewel system here, and we could definitely do a little bit of work, like landing on Laythe or doing some moon work out here, or just trying to fly in the Julian atmosphere. That would be awkward. I don't know that that would be a great thing to do. But that would be an option. So, Kodra, what do you think that you would like to see with Jewel exploration? We need to know what that needs to look like before we can really start designing a craft for it. So that would be good to know. I want to check what we start with. Okay, Jeb, Bill, Bob, Valentina, and they're all maxed. That should be fine. No problem there whatsoever. So, I mean, we can start thinking about what our lifter might look like. I don't want to actually load anything. I would want to start this from scratch. We'd probably end up going for, like, a 3-seater. Probably... I don't know if we'd be budgeting this for a return trip or not. Return trip from Jewel could be very expensive. That would be for sure. But, of course, we don't have to worry about cost, so that's not a problem. We need a mission profile before we can really start anything. We definitely need a mission profile here. So let's hop back out over here, sending a plane to Laythe. Yeah, we could do that. So we'd go into the space plane hangar then. And that would almost certainly not be returning. Although we maybe wouldn't want to like try to SSTO to Laythe. That's probably a little much for that thing is definitely hovering. Okay. Actually, all of these guys are hovering. Fantastic. That's an SSTO to Laythe with a plane would probably be a bit much for us. So we might want to angle for like a vertical takeoff rather than a horizontal one and try to boost it somehow. But we would definitely go into the pods here, and we could bring in like, I mean, that's basically a space shuttle nose. We could bring in like a Mark II, or we could do a Mark I. this Mark II cockpit wouldn't be awful. And then there's the inline cockpit. I mean, that's always hilarious, but a Parker solar probe, maybe. Oh, that's an interesting concept, too. We'll see if we have time for that one after the Julian mission. We'll see how that goes. I do like the concept of the Parker solar probe. The difficult part about getting that done would be that it's using gravity assist to get closer and closer and closer in, and that's some real projection on that flight path. Like, that flight path is projected out like 25 years. We maybe wouldn't exactly emulate that portion. But yeah, that's an interesting concept too. I like that concept. So I mean, as far as I'm just thinking a dumb idea. What if we combined the two? That is the dumbest idea I've ever seen. We go fly in Laythe, and then we park our solar probe and get closer and closer to Kerbal. Oh, that would be a Delta V nightmare. Absolute Delta V nightmare. So, I mean, one thing that we could do here, I kind of feel like the plane to Laythe is maybe a little bit overdone. I don't know. What do you guys think? We could definitely do that. Or we could... Okay, this is... I just saw that there, and I'm like, I have to look at this and look at how absurd this is. Obviously, it was never going to fit. It was never, ever going to fit. But I think that we should probably, if we're going to do the plane to Laythe, we should probably use, like, the Mark II cockpit. What's the crew capacity on that? Crew capacity is 2. Okay. So, using the Mark II, then, we would use, like... I think for a Laythe plane, the question then becomes, what kind of thrust to weight do we get on Laythe? I don't actually know that off the top of my head. So what I would want to do is use like a Mark III liquid fuselage, or a Mark III, yeah, liquid fuselage here. Not necessarily the short, like this one, right? And that's 800. So then we would use like a bicoupler here, and then, or maybe even... Oh, that adapter's awful. This adapter would go in like this, which I think is awkward, but that is a fuel adapter. I'm just wondering what the thrust to weight on this would be. Oh, that does contain oxidizer. What would the thrust to weight on this be if we had this be a nerve? And in the process, get a Kerbal to collect a surface sample from Kerbal. Oh boy. That's not even possible. Okay, so over Joule... Laythe 0.62. So we would almost certainly require quite a bit more in terms of that. I mean, I would, if we're going to do Laythe, I would like to do atomic rocket motors. That would probably be the best bet. I suppose one thing that we could do is kind of combine the flight profile, get some flight on Laythe, and then go back out, and then, like, go around Kerbal somewhat close, but hopefully not too close. We'd have to eyeball that. That might result in failure. And then bring it back to Kerbin. That could be interesting. Now, if we were going to do that, we would certainly want a little bit of fuel. And something like this would be what? We don't need this oxidizer. Something like this would be what in terms of thrust to weight over Laythe? 0.81. Now, that's at the surface of Laythe. This would be theoretically doable. Okay. And then we would need some sort of wings on this. What are we doing? We are still working on determining that. So far, our ideas are flying on Laythe, and we are also currently thinking about a Parker solar probe and maybe combining the flight profile for some insanity. I have no idea how well that will work or what kind of Delta V we'll need. We're just winging this. Speaking of wings, we need to put wings on this thing. So how do we want to go about doing that? Well, I think we probably... I mean, we could go with, like, Delta wings. What is the size of those? They feel slightly small, but maybe not too bad. We could go with big spaceplane tail fins as wings. I feel like that's probably insufficient lift. And what is our center of mass compared to our center of lift here? we'd probably want to work on that. We could go with just aeroplane main wings. Those are hilariously large. Propeller blades. I mean, that's a potential option. I don't know how great of an option that is. Out of curiosity, if we were to go for something ridiculous, okay, that's really ridiculous. That's basically right in the center of mass, and this is not going to fly well, but I just kind of want to see what this thing looks like if I can get it rotated the way I want it to. There we go. Hypothetically, like this. If we were to put this in close orbit over Laythe and just test it out, this is gonna go terribly. I'm pretty sure of this. But I want to see how terribly and in what way. So let's go ahead and do a quick simulation here and see how it flies in the Laythe atmosphere. It's going to be awful, I'm pretty sure. And we're going to revert it, definitely. But let's just put this up there, and let's take a quick look. So we'll set that orbit over Laythe. There it is. And there we go. This is probably too high of an orbit. We don't need this semi-major axis to be this high, do we? What if we were to set it like here? At like half this height. Okay, that's below what it's safe. That's the minimum safe value for orbit. Sounds good. Yeah, that'll do just fine. Okay, we don't really have much for power in this, and that's fine. I mean, these atomic rocket motors do have alternators, so that would be okay. Wait, this is Kerbin? No, this is Laythe. What am I talking about? I'm apparently blind. Good to know. Good to know that I'm blind. This is going to go awful, for the record. Absolutely terrible. And it'll be great. So let's bring this down a little bit, and we just want to dip into the atmosphere a little bit here. Okay, something kind of like that. We'll flip around to prograde. And let's see how terribly this thing flies. Now, I'm expecting this to be awful. Absolutely awful. But because we're coming in at a reasonable speed here, it'll probably, and we're going to be sticking with just the prograde marker, it would probably be completely fine in theory. Let's come in at like this angle, and let's bring it on in. What is the Laythe atmosphere here? 60? 50? 55? I'm not actually sure. We can't warp faster than 10x right now. Let's see what this is. Because we're just dipping into the atmosphere here, this is probably reasonably fine. But I want to see how it goes. So obviously we are pretty far off of prograde right now. I'm guessing the atmosphere here starts at like 50 kilometers? Yes. Okay. Fantastic. So let's see how this goes. Okay, we'll just get in position here. This is reasonably fine. We appear to have a bit of a roll, but it's all good. So the idea here would be that we just dip into the atmosphere and then punch back out of the atmosphere by burning at the periapsis. Now, I don't necessarily expect, yeah, the thrust to weight is currently 0.79. That is about what I expected. But that should be reasonably okay. And then the idea from here would be that we would want to probably try to slingshot around Joule to push in as close to Kerbal as we could. And then use that at the periapsis down like, I don't know, here-ish to try to transfer to Kerbin. But timing would be important on that. And I don't exactly know what we'd do for that just yet. This is a lot of Delta V, but it's not unlimited Delta V by any means. And we have to get it here, of course. But currently, this section seems to be going just fine. We're about 4 minutes from this periapsis, so we should probably consider physics warping here. We appear to be holding attitude without a problem. So that's good to know. And once we're done with this section, in theory, these tail fins are unnecessary. In theory. But we probably want to keep them. Okay. So we're going to be arriving at that periapsis here in about 2 minutes 40. We're definitely starting to see quite a lot of aerodynamic resistance, which is unsurprising. But we're holding attitude absolutely fine here. Lifting this thing off is going to be exciting. Okay. This time to periapsis is being a little awkward. We are going to see about acceleration here. So we might have to have a slightly higher periapsis here. Okay, there we go. Much better. So we got some burn going there, and we're going to push back up through the atmosphere here, back up to an apoapsis of about 100 kilometers, and we'll just try to hold it there. So we are now at the minimum of our... Yeah, that's our periapsis right there. We're now starting to go back up. And we are seeing a little bit of heating here, but not too bad, all things considered. This seems reasonably viable. Of course, getting it here is another story, and I'm not sure how we're going to do that just yet. But this is reasonably viable. Okay. I'm going to physics sort back up a little bit here, and we're going to hold our apoapsis about where it's at. I want to start pushing it up a little bit here and there. Just throttling up ever so slightly as we go through the atmosphere here. Holding our apoapsis at about 100 kilometers would be absolutely fine. Okay. And it appears to be getting largely under control. I'm seeing a pretty big turn here, but the nav ball is holding. We'll just burn ever so gently there. Okay, so that appears to be functional. We're definitely seeing a little bit of heating there. So if we take that back to the vehicle assembly, then we can think about how to get it there. That is a whole nother question. I would like this to be basically fresh when it arrives there, right? That would be the best way to do it. I don't know how viable that is, though. One thing I was thinking about potentially doing is using a quasi-space shuttle concept, except I don't want to angle the engines because of the offset thrust. So instead, we could have 2 parallel lifters, one on each side. That'd be a little wacky, but it would be something kind of like this would go here-ish. I don't know about exactly there. We could lift that then with ideally like probably going to use mainsails, in all honesty. Those are definitely the workhorse engine that I usually use. So it would be something kind of like this. It would have to be strutted together a bit. And it's weird looking. There's no doubt about that. But what would this lift with 2 mainsails? Now, this is not the final thing that we're going to lift it with, obviously. I'm just checking thrust to weight. 1.6. Okay. So we take that off, and I would then want to have, like, probably 1 additional Jumbo 64. Now, this is going to put our thrust to weight pretty low. And we would definitely want to put nose cones on there. Those nose cones should be detachable. So we would want to put a TD25 decoupler, something like this, and then a second TD25 decoupler, like this. And then it would not lift like that. We would definitely want to have, like, poodles on here. So, like that. We would want to have some form of power generation and probably some power storage on here too, but just power generation is probably sufficient. So we could do like 1x5s. I mean, that'll do the trick. Okay. We wouldn't necessarily need comms on that, but then we would have this be responsible in theory for getting us to Laythe. The question is, if we have this, what exactly is our... I would want this to be here. Kind of like this. What exactly would our thrust to weight, or not really thrust to weight here, but delta V look like in stage 1? Or stage 0? No, stage 1. That's about 4,000. Okay. That's a good amount of delta V. And then if we were to lift it like this, and as usual, I like to make my first stages orange. But if we were to lift it like this is wild for sure. This would be what kind of... This needs to be in its own stage. What kind of thrust to weight on the ground would this have? 1.12. So this is very, very low thrust to weight. I'm having another bad idea here. And that other bad idea is that we attach on SRBs here. And then I would get rid of... Well, actually, not like that. These are already... Oh, okay. I see what it's doing. Do we need to have these quad coupled? No, we'd have to do it like this, which is not awkward at all. Definitely not awkward at all. You could assemble it in orbit. Sure, you could, but, I mean, we don't have to. Well, that's interesting. Why did this not get duplicated here? That's wild. Oh, I see what it's doing. Okay, that's awkward. We could simply have them come out over this way, though. That is an option. And extend it further. Oops, wrong window there. Extend it further out this direction. That's an option. And we could lift this in with, like, pollexes. I mean, that would be pretty weird. This whole thing is pretty weird. I'm not gonna lie. This is the definition of a harebrained scheme right now. Okay, so we bring this down to be about here or so. We don't want to lift with this because this is pure liquid fuel here. Okay. And then this would have a thrust to weight of 1.45. So we would actually need Clydesdales, not Pollexes. Okay, that's fine. We can lift with Clydesdales if we have to. I have no idea what this thing's going to fly like. This is going to be... This is going to be really weird. There's no doubt about it. So we put on Clydesdales. Those are probably overkill for what we've got going on here, right? If we toss in the mainsails, 1.63. So that's about right in terms of thrust to weight. This is really dumb. I'm not going to lie. I don't even know what to say about it other than this is really, really dumb. So we're going to move these guys down and move the attach point up here as far as we can. That would be this guy. Moved up to about here-ish. This thing would fall over this direction in a stiff breeze. So that's kind of what the wings are there to help with, though. Ish. I mean, they can push this way, though. They can't so much push this way, can they? Well, this is going to be very interesting. We'll see what the gimbaling does. This is... I wouldn't be surprised if there are many explosions in our future, for the record. So we're going to strut this together. A single strut is definitely not enough here. We're going to strut that there, and then bring these in. They're going to, like, cross in an awkward fashion, but I guess it's okay. Kind of like this. This is insane. This is absolutely crazy. But, I mean, it's very Kerbal. There is that. This is exceptionally Kerbal. Okay, so I want those to fire at that time. Stage 2 does not need to exist. That fires. Yeah, that's all okay. Sure. So hypothetically, it would be something like this. Now, returning and going around Kerbal and then coming back to Kerbin is a wacky flight profile. And I don't know if we have enough Delta V to really pull it off. And the real question is one of timing. Right? So we're going to have to try to find the correct timing for that. Which is going to be interesting. because I'm not very good at that. That is something that I am objectively bad at, is doing that sort of thing. So, I mean, this should, in theory, make its way into orbit nicely. And, well, maybe nicely. Let's give it a go and see what happens. I would not be shocked if there are copious explosions. This is very poorly thought out, I'm pretty sure. But in some ways, that's what makes Kerbal fun, is doing dumb things. So we're going to throttle this up, and we'll see how this goes. Not too bad off the pad. A little bit on the slow side, but we'll probably be grateful for that a little later on. Okay. Let's start getting some horizontal speed. I tend to get too much vertical on my ascents. At least with the Clydesdales, this isn't feeling too bad. Oh, okay. Yeah. I forgot to strut this together. That's exciting. I did intend to do that, but I didn't do it. Let's see if we explode. That is something I definitely forgot to do. I was planning to, but it didn't ever happen. We're going to have way too much vertical speed here, for sure. Okay. These SRBs are definitely long burning. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, this needs to be strutted together. Let's go ahead and pull that back, actually. We're not going to have an explosion, it looks like, so no joy there. That makes me a little sad. Let's pull that back, get that strutted together, and we'll see how it goes with it actually solid. That would help. So I'm going to toss in a strut here. I'm also going to toss in a strut up here. Now, we don't really have any way to land this either. That is definitely something that I should have thought of as well. So I guess we may as well do that right now. We could put in, like, a pair of drogue chutes up here. That is some really weird angling. Okay, that's much better. We could put in the drogue chutes there, and then, like, main chutes here, and try to land it just with chutes. But that's not actually what I was intending to go for. I want to go for mirror symmetry here, and I want to drop this in here. Just the drogue chutes for the time being. I'd like to try to horizontally land this thing. I think the odds on that are a little long. But I'd like to have, like, small retractable landing gear. And we're going to have this be in mirror symmetry. There we go. We're going to have this be, like, here. And I'm going to rotate them. About like that. And we will start retracted. And then we're going to have additional small landing gear back here. Now, again, I do believe that this is probably going to go poorly. Very, very poorly. We need to get over here, I think. No, it wants to go back to that symmetry. Okay, so we need to get it up over here so we can actually use mirror symmetry. But drop them in, like, down here. Okay. Now we can use the tools and drop that down to be about here. And get them rotated. This is going to go pretty poorly, this landing, I'm pretty sure. Okay. But that's kind of the point. We'll start that retracted, and let's see. These struts didn't actually replicate. So let's see about getting those replicated. I want it strutted to both sides here. There we go. Much better. That should be a lot more stable. But overall, that went a lot better than I was expecting it to. We still don't really have a good plan for how we're going to land this thing, right? But that's part of the fun. So we're going to launch this and see how this goes. It flew way better than I expected it to, in all honesty. I mean, I know it's nice and symmetrical, but even so, this is a silly idea. This is incredibly silly. Let's get this going. Off the pad we go. That should be much, much more stable. And at this point, I'm going to turn and get horizontal speed quite a bit faster here. I waited too long last time as well, I feel like. So we're just going to bring this on over. Okay. Let's just lock to prograde now. And we'll see how that goes. This is going to be interesting, for sure. Double checking staging. Looks reasonably fine. A little bit off on our heading. I will attempt to rectify that. Yaw is difficult for us, I think. Or rather, pitch is difficult for us, I think. But we'll rectify that a little bit. Okay. Still a lot of vertical speed going on here, but that's reasonably fine. Okay. We'll be detaching our SRBs here in about 15 seconds. At which point, I'll feel a lot more comfortable about pitching over, I'm sure. A lot of speed coming in here. 5 more seconds on the SRBs. We're very high on the apoapsis height. Off go the SRBs. And yeah, we had way too much vertical height there, that's for sure. We'll just bring this guy on over and work on some horizontal speed. 200 kilometers. Yeah. Way too much vertical speed there. No, I don't want to warp there. Stop it. Stop warping. Okay. We just want to get some horizontal speed. Okay, something quasi like that. That'll do. So that is going to burn out this entire stage, and that's mostly due to our ascent profile. Okay. We should have quite a lot of Delta V in this stage to get us where we need to go, though. So that should be okay, I think. I'm completely winging this, so we'll see how badly I fail it. Let's go ahead and warp forward a little bit, although we do need to continue to steer a bit. How are we steering right now? Oh, this does have a reaction wheel. Okay, for a second there I thought it didn't. Is this retractable? It is not. So our photovoltaic panels are going to burn out when we go through Laythe. Should have thought of that one. That is definitely something that I should have thought of. But for now, that's fine. Actually, can Bill retract them with an EVA? I'm not sure if he can or not. No. Okay. He would be able to repair them, but we don't have any repair kits. So that's exciting. We're going to have some power issues. Okay. In that case, I actually should revert this back again. There's no point in not reverting it in a sandbox mode game, so that's fine. We're going to... That's definitely what I wanted to grab. Okay, we're going to get those out of there, and they do need to be retractable. So we'll put them in a bit more like... let's try turning that snap off and putting this in mirror symmetry. And putting them like... No, in mirror symmetry. There we go. And then putting them like here. Okay. That could be potentially problematic for, well, no, that should be fine. Yeah, that should be reasonably fine. Okay. So we'll get that done, and we'll get this thing launched again. Although, we do want to have a bit more efficient of an ascent trajectory. So we know that we need quite a lot more horizontal speed than what we had there, so that should definitely be a thing that we do. Okay, throttle up, and off we go. And let's start getting more horizontal speed. Beautiful. Over we go. Hopefully not too over, but over we go. More horizontal speed would definitely be much appreciated. Now we've drifted quite a bit. Oh, okay. We're just going to lock to prograde for right now. We're having a hard time actually holding this attitude a bit. So we're just going to do something like this. We've definitely gotten ourselves quite a bit more horizontal speed, so that's good. But that attitude is a bit awkward to hold. I want to pull this up a little bit. Try to correct our inclination slightly. And this is definitely much better on the horizontal speed, but I want still more. I want to be at least 45 degrees by the time we detach the SRBs. Okay. Now, we're definitely... That's a bit of a visual bug there. We're definitely seeing some speed here. No doubt about that. 2, 1... Okay, we are separated. At this point, I'm going to head directly over to the horizon, and we're just going to burn at the horizon here until we're like 200 kilometers. Yeah, it's a very high orbit, but that's fine. Okay. So we'll burn here for a little bit, and attempt to get ourselves into orbit with this stage would be ideal. We'll see how realistic that is, but that's 200 kilometers there. So, yeah, that's more horizontal speed. I'm not going to call it a good amount of horizontal speed. Those SRBs are a little overpowered for what they are, but that's okay. So, yeah, that's broadly similar to what we had previously. Okay. We'll physics warp as we turn over. But this time, we are doing much better, in theory, in terms of our power. So that should be good. We'll get our solar panels extended. And at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and jettison our nose cones, since those are not needed. Probably should have turned the decouplers around so the decouplers went with, but it's okay. Cool. So we're going to warp forward until our circularization burn here. Okay. And let's burn. Very high orbit, but it is what it is. And these stages will be done shortly. Was that just our nose cones that we passed there? Hilarious. Okay. Successful stage separation there. Of course it was. We don't have any failure mods installed, so that'll be fine. Okay, so our thrust to weight here isn't the highest, but we do have good delta V out of these two. So that'll do. Let's go ahead and physics warp forward. We are in orbit as of now, but we're not circularized just yet. 5 more seconds of burn. We'll call that good enough. Okay, so at this point, we want to do a Mooner transfer and do a gravity assist to get out of here a little more cheaply. That's probably... I mean, technically, that gives us another moon encounter. Okay, a little bit more prograde here. That's an escape, but we can probably fine-tune this a little bit. I'm thinking. And save a little bit of delta V here. That's not a moon escape, or rather a Kerbin escape there. That is. I guess we'll call that good. It's probably not optimal, but it'll be fine. 776 meters per second for a Kerbin escape sounds pretty good. And let's go ahead and warp to that. This thing is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Now that I look at it, we probably should have mounted these up here and had the tanks spin off this direction, but it'll do. We'll warp forward a little further. And the question is, how much do we actually need to get from Joule back to a, like, kind of Parker-esque orbit around Kerbal? That's quite a question. We're going to physics warp here as we burn through this. 550 meters per second. Okay. Another 40 seconds in this burn. Another 10 seconds. Okay. Good enough? Not quite. We're going to lock to prograde and just push this a little further. Okay, and double check that we're not impacting the moon. We are not. Looks good. Let's go ahead and warp. We are out of here. I can't believe this thing worked as well as it did. I mean, it's very symmetrical. One of the major points behind doing it this way was I didn't want to have to work with angling our center booster, right? Or our outside booster. I didn't want to have an offset center of thrust from our center of mass. I didn't want to have to bother with that. So that was the reason why we went for this weird parallel booster setup. And ultimately, I feel like it worked remarkably well. But there was our gravity assist, and we are now on our way out of here. So at this point, we can warp around here. And the question is, what would a Joule interception end up looking like? We need to set that as our target, and we need to change our inclination. So at this ascending node, we're going to need to burn anti-normal. And how much will that take? About 200 meters per second. We can maybe fine-tune that a tiny bit. Yeah, a very tiny bit. About here would be good. Although, is this at the current ascending node? Yeah, this is at the ascending node after this. That's fine. So we'll just align for that maneuver. Our reaction wheel is struggling a bit, but that's fine. We've got 2,700 meters per second left in our boosters here, so that's okay. We will go ahead and warp to this next maneuver. And we'll get that burnt. And then we'll need to find a Joule intercept, and ideally one that also gives us a Laythe intercept. We'll see how that ends up going. But this burn will be, honestly, we can do this now. This is close enough. So we'll go ahead and burn it. And let's get that done. 2, 1, and... should be good enough. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, so as we head out to Joule, let's see, Joule is moving pretty slowly. So somewhere around perhaps here? How much DV is that going to be? That's going to be a lot. Okay. I'm not super shocked about that. One thing we can do is we can attempt to gravity assist off of Dress to get there. That'll require timing, for sure. Okay, I'm just looking at when this is happening. Only slightly awkward. So that's where we will be. That's where Joule will be. We'll have to be quite a bit later over here. Something along the lines of this-ish. What does that get us? That's a very external orbit. Okay. I want to be able to modify this timing. Can I grab the node, please? Thank you. Okay. What's that looking like? I mean, ideally, we would love to find a Laythe encounter while we are doing this. Okay, so this is more prograde here. This would be ideal if Laythe happened to be here, but we could toss in a little bit of normal. Hello. That's a Laythe encounter. I'm not going to call it a great Laythe encounter, but it is a Laythe encounter. Doing something kind of like this. I'm assuming, which way is Laythe rotating? This way? Let's find out. Yes. Laythe is rotating this direction. So that means that we are coming in retrograde currently. It doesn't really matter, but we can come in a bit more like this. Now, what kind of delta V will this require if we want to then enter orbit? Significant is the answer. Incredibly significant. Like, this is a lot of delta V significant. Yeah, that's 7,000 meters per second. We can do this more efficiently, I'm sure. So if we were to do that, then we would instead want to bring this in to encapsulate Laythe's orbit a bit like this. And then we would circularize over Joule here to be kind of like that. And then we do our Laythe intercept. That's 1513. Okay. But then, in theory, we can slingshot around Joule and push our way back into the inner system. We may have to abandon the Kerbal portion of it in terms of delta V, but this part of it is probably doable. And this is part of what happens when you just completely make it up as you go along. Okay. So that would be fine. We'll see what we can get after this. I mean, we do still have a good amount of delta V here. We have about 7,000. So that's something to note. But let's go ahead and warp to that maneuver. And we don't need to be in here. There we go. About 120 days on this warp. And let's see how this goes. So this is going to burn out these entire stages on our transfer over. That's fine. Then we're going to need to figure out which direction we need to gravity assist around Joule for to get back. Which will also be fine. So we'll go ahead and start this burn in a few seconds here. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and burn. So I was hoping we'd get a little further on these tanks, but it is what it is. This is fine. It's going to be about a 4-minute burn, so we will go ahead and physics warp that. And we'll see what the final orbit here ends up looking like. It'll probably be almost close enough. Almost. So we'll bring that in something like this. And we'll see if we can maybe find ourselves a decent encounter here. But off we go. Definitely rolling a bit here, which is awkward. But that's fine. We're going to drop our physics warp somewhat soon. I'm also going to retract these solar panels for the time being, because I don't want them broken when we split this off. Okay. So we're going to stop our physics warp right about now. There we go. Cool. Okay. So let's see what our orbit is currently looking like. Nowhere even close. So we've got about another 100 meters per second to burn here. Okay. 70 meters per second. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Okay. That's interesting. But it's only 4 meters per second. So, fascinating. So we're coming in retrograde here. We should flip that around. This is the wrong way. That's a big part of the reason why that Laythe encounter was so expensive. It's going to be very cheap to flip that around at this point, and we will get rid of this maneuver. So we're going to pull that back around. I didn't realize that we were retrograde there. That's definitely something I should have realized. So we're going to come in here like so now. Hang on. There was an encounter there. I'm going to flip back around to prograde, and we're going to try to find that encounter. This is very cheap at this point, so this is fine. We'll bring this in, and... okay. So that's internal. Let's go ahead and get our solar panels back out, for one thing. And then I'm going to thrust limit these engines down to like 10%, because this is very minute adjustments that we're making here. And then I want to pull this back out ever so slightly. That periapsis is a little higher than I'd like to see. And it's cheapest to adjust it now. So we're going to do that. This is still very, very minute adjustments. I'm going to thrust limit these down to 0.5%. Actually, 1%, I guess, is what I managed to get there. There we go. 1%. Okay. Going to bring that in to about 55 kilometers. Or actually, 60 kilometers, I think. Yeah, that'll do. I don't really care about this inclination so much, although we may want to modify it. And now would be the time to do that. Okay. This is only 1% thrust, so we'll physics warp that, and we'll make that be a bit more equatorial. We're going to have to push that node back out, but that's fine. Let's bring that back in. Much better. Okay. Now let's pull it over to, I think retrograde is the one that we want, although I can't remember. Nope, prograde. Okay. So we're going to push that node back out a little bit to about 60 kilometers. That'll do. Then we will add a maneuver here, and we will circularize that down a bit, bringing that down to our flight height, which was about 45 kilometers, was what we determined. Okay. So something kind of like this. This is going to be very similar to our test flight that we did. That's going to be about 1,000 meters per second there. So that's fine. We will orient for that burn. And that burn is going to be in about 2 years. So we've got a bit of warp ahead of us. Let's go. 2 years, 140 days. That's not dizzying at all. Let's just get zoomed out here. Perfect. Okay. This is a surprisingly good encounter that we've got here. But yeah, this is going to be a lengthy warp. That's for sure. A lot of coasting going on here. Whole lot of coasting. But we managed to cut out one burn, and that's excellent. And I'm very glad that I caught that we were coming in retrograde. I definitely should have caught that earlier, but it's okay. Still about 2 years to warp here. Very, very lengthy warp. But we are going at maximum speed times 100,000 time. That's a lot. A whole lot. Well, we're about to pass the orbit of Dress here. In fact, there we go. Fantastic. And we can definitely see how much Laythe is wobbling around right now. From its orbit there. Always nice. So, once we come in here, the question is, how much delta V will it take us to get back? That is quite a question. We'll figure that out. Once we're in orbit around Laythe, after our flight, then we'll see what we can do. We do still have about 4,500 delta V. We'll have about 3,500 once we get this done. So that'll be exciting. We're definitely slowing down a lot as we approach the apoapsis. And another 400 days to go here. Well, this sort of a time warp is always highly exciting, and this is the sort of thing, if I was making a series video, that I would just pause the recording for and say, we'll come back to this in a bit. But that's not an option with a stream, sadly. So here we are. We've got about 300 days left. But this is just kind of the nature of working with these outer planets, right? So it is what it is. I am wondering exactly how much effect we're going to be able to get out of the gravity assist from Jool. As well, I'm wondering what the atmospheric characteristics are of Jool. We know for Laythe it's 50,000 meters. Words are very difficult all of a sudden. We know that that's the case for Laythe. The question is, what is the case for Jool? I would have to look that up. I'm going to do that right now, actually. Let's see here. Joule atmosphere height. Let's see. Atmosphere is at 200 kilometers. Okay, good to know. So that is important, and here we come. We are currently about a minute away from our burn. Something feels very wrong here. Oh, are we not in, we're not in the Laythe encounter yet. Our burn is going to be 4 hours long. That doesn't seem right either. That's because it's not right. We're still thrust limited. Okay. That makes things make a lot more sense. Fantastic. We're going to warp forward to our burn now. Cool. Well, I'm glad I caught that one. And in we go. Hi, Jool. And hi, Laythe. It's very dark here, but perfect. Okay, so we're going to begin this burn shortly. We are going to need to stow our solar panels, and that's fine. These engines do have alternators on them, so we will have full battery. We can hold 150 charge, so that's good. We're going to warp forward a little bit here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Hit the wrong button there, but we're good. Cool. So we'll just get this burn done. And that'll be about a 2-minute burn. All looks good. So we are now, our periapsis is still outside of the atmosphere, which is 50 kilometers for the record. And it's mostly our apoapsis that is currently dropping, but that's fine. That's exactly what we want for the moment. Okay. We've got about 5 meters per second to go here. That should do. What are we looking at for our periapsis? 45 kilometers. Looks good. We're not going too deep. And we are going to warp now until we hit the atmosphere. And we'll just fly through and skip out of the atmosphere for the moment. I'm not too concerned about anything else because Delta V is a pretty major concern. And honestly, these wings are pretty unnecessary for right now. But that's okay. We will just warp on forward. 50 kilometers, we know the height is. So I'm going to stop this warp at around 51 so that we have time to make our way back to prograde. Cool. 55 kilometers. 54. 53. 52. And 51 kilometers. Let's get reoriented. We're gonna dip into the atmosphere here. Cool. So we're about 5 minutes away from our periapsis right now. And we'll keep an eye on time to periapsis here. If that starts to decline, or rather, if that starts to slow down too much, then we'll just add in a little bit more thrust, like we did in the simulation. So that'll be fine. I think I want to come in at this attitude. It feels a little bit more like flying to me. I don't know. It's weird because this is not... Like, this is with the wings parallel to the ground, I suppose. So maybe we'll do that. That'll be fine. Okay, so we are definitely in the atmosphere here, and we will work on our physics warp a bit. Bringing that in. I'm keeping an eye right now mostly on the time to periapsis here. If that number starts slowing down in its decline, we're going to have to add a little bit more speed. And we'll have to push our apoapsis height up as we approach the periapsis anyway. Okay. We're very close to the periapsis height here, but you can see here, this time to periapsis has become a bit of a problem. So I'm adding more speed, and we're just going to push that up to about 100 kilometers as we did before. And there we go. We add a little bit more speed, and that means that we're more likely, well, we're pretty much guaranteed at this point to exit the atmosphere, which is exactly what we want. Hello, Laythe. Pleasure doing business with you. I actually don't do too much with Laythe usually. I don't know. I kind of feel like Laythe is a little bit overdone. I don't know. We're about 25 seconds from our periapsis at this point. I'm going to add a little bit more speed to keep our apoapsis height up above 100 kilometers. We don't need much additional fuel for that. But that station keeping will be somewhat necessary. Just throttling up a teeny tiny amount to bring that up, just to counter the aerodynamic drag here and there. We're at the periapsis now. We have begun to increase in altitude. So that's cool. Bringing our apoapsis height back on up to 100 kilometers. Actually, I'm going to bring it to like 105. 3, 4, and 5. Cool. So we're currently about 15 minutes to apoapsis. I'm going to physics warp as we go through this a little bit. Maybe only like 2x for the moment. 4x is fine, in all honesty. Okay. Pushing our apoapsis height back up a bit. And there we go. Let's exit Laythe. We'll be out in about 2 kilometers. 1 kilometer of altitude. Oh, hello, Jewel. That's an exciting view there, actually. Okay, we're now officially in vacuum. So we no longer need to physics warp, and we're going to come around to the apoapsis here. I don't want to do another pass through the atmosphere, so we are just going to push this out. About like that. That'll do. That's only 47 meters per second, so that's great. We'll orient for that. And let's warp onto it. And now the question becomes, what can we get done with the Delta V we have left in terms of the remainder of the mission? We'll find out. That's always the most exciting part of this. We've got about 6 minutes left until this burn. Oh, and we should probably extend our solar panels. How are we doing on our electric charge? For now, it's fine. But we'll re-extend our solar panels. We don't need to retract those again until we're landing on Kerbin. Cool. And we will enter orbit here, and then we're going to have to try to find ourselves a Kerbin encounter. The timing on that is going to be interesting and might require a lot of time warp. We'll see. But let's just get ourselves up into a proper orbit, which we now are. We'll call that good enough. Cool. Okay, so at this point, sometime around here, although we'll probably wait until next orbit, although that's 30 minutes away. This is in next orbit. Well, we're going kind of an awkward direction. Which way would this go? Yes. This is the direction we'd want to go, I think. No. We want to go the other way. Okay. So we'll flip that around, and we'll try this direction. That's impacting Joule, which is certainly non-ideal. Okay. So when do we want to burn this? I mean, burning it over here would be ideal. That would give us a much more economical escape, but that also puts us into this situation here, which is kind of the opposite of the situation that we want. So in that case, I think we need to wait until our orbit is later, because we need to burn when Laythe is in a specific position, right? And the question is, how far does Laythe actually move per orbit here? I'm going to add like 3-4 orbits to this. And then we're going to bring this around. I think this is still going the wrong direction. Yes, it is. So we're going to have to wait longer. I'm going to add another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 orbits. This timing is going to be the complicated portion, and I'm bad at this stuff. So this could be a little bit fiddly. This is definitely the wrong side of Laythe for this section of the orbit. As is this. This would be for if we're going to Joule, not if we're attempting to escape from Joule. This is more like escaping from Joule. Although this is a whole lot of delta V, I want to see how our timing is, though. I think it's still bad. Yeah, overall, that's just not going to work. There is a way that we can make this happen, but it's going to be very fiddly, and I'm really bad at this stuff. So what we're probably going to end up doing here is we're probably just going to end up doing this number. And escaping from Joule, well, that timing is not ideal. Okay. We can get a much more economical Joule escape by burning about here. Like that. So that would put us out of the Joule system into this orbit, which is very much not the orbit that I want. So I don't think that's what we want to do. This sort of orbital dynamics is complicated to figure out in KSP. We'll find it. We will find it. So if we wanted to come over here and burn prograde, that puts us something like this. Yeah, something kind of like this. I don't really want to get any radial in there. So I want to have this remain retrograde, I think. Yeah, so it's going to be very awkward. There is a way to do this the way that I originally envisioned. It's going to be very, very complicated for me to figure out the timing on it because I'm really bad at that. But I'll just explain what the idea would have been. So the idea would have been that we escape from Laythe into a slingshot around Joule. And that would be timed in such a way where Joule would be like at a point in its orbit, and Laythe would have to be at a point in its orbit as well, where that slingshot around Joule would propel us out of the Joule system and towards Kerbal, which we would then come around and do a braking burn, like here-ish, and then that would bring us back up to Kerbin here at the apoapsis of that braking burn, that we would then intercept Kerbin in its atmosphere, and then do a radial retrograde re-entry burn, and then land on Kerbin. That would be the plan. The problem with that, of course, is you have to have Kerbin, you have to have Joule, and you have to have Laythe, all in exactly the correct positions. Finding that in KSP is very complicated. I'm sure there are mods to make it simpler, but that would have been the overall idea. I don't think that we're going to easily locate that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for an escape from Laythe that pushes our apoapsis out. Not to way out there, but to about here or so. And then from there, maybe seek an escape from Joule. Now, that's about 1,000 meters per second to get there. The question is, how much would this be to get an escape there? Quite a lot is the answer. So we might be better off seeking a gravity assist from one of the moons, actually. And let's go ahead and give that a go. So let's see what we can get there. If I can select this thing. There we go. And now if I can press the delete button, delete maneuver, it can be a little awkward, but there we go. Okay, so if we say wanted to target Vol, and then we head out of here, and this timing is obviously really, really awkward, but if we targeted Vol and headed out a bit more like this, hypothetically. Okay, and then changed our timing on that to add in an orbit here-ish. There we go. Did that just change our inclination? Okay. It does change when the burn happens, and this is a elliptical orbit, so that's not hugely shocking. That gives us a second Laythe encounter, which is definitely not what we're looking for. Yeah, in general, that's just going to be awkward. So I think the original plan might actually be the best plan, which would have been to push out over this direction and get an escape from Joule for relatively cheap. Like that. Now, that does push our apoapsis way up, but we may just omit the encounter with Kerbal. That might be for the best. And then we can bring this in. We can aero brake. So at that point, we would want to have it be like, I don't know, it doesn't have to be out here, but something kind of like this. Bring that in to a Kerbin encounter. How much delta V is that right now? Well, we can see it's about 2,000. So that's getting awfully close there, but that is actually at the Eve orbit level. Pushing that out like that would be a lot better. About 1,500. And our inclination isn't too bad either. Okay. We just have to choose our timing on that correctly. That seems doable. So we'll just bring this back to Kerbin and omit the solar part, and we'll do a solar probe after this, I think. That'll be fine. Let's bring this on home. This is going to be in 4 years. Okay, this maneuver is a little broken. We're going to have to redo that, but that's fine. So once we are here, we want to burn this way and push out about like that. That's 1,100 meters per second. We can almost certainly make that a little cheaper by coming over here. Yes. That's 892. Can we get that any cheaper? Perhaps. Yeah, this is about as cheap as we're going to get it. It's pretty close. So that'll do. We will go ahead and align for that, and that burn will be in about 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and get this home. 10 minutes here. And then we'll try to do a Parker Solar Probe style thing after that. Although I'm not sure if the gravity assist braking will really function in KSP. I don't know. Sometimes that sort of thing is a little broken. But we'll see how this goes. We could have, like, engines on there and pretend we're gravity assisting. 2, 1, and 0. Okay. So off we go. We are out of here. It's going to be interesting to see if we have enough Delta V to get us home, but I think we'll have just enough. The question is, do we burn up on re-entry? That's going to be a question, too. Okay. And can I land this thing? I think the answer to that is probably a no, but we'll see. Okay. Just double checking our trajectory here. Looks good. Overshot slightly, but that's okay. And we are out of here. So next up, we are going to set Kerbin, which is currently covered in junk. We're going to set Kerbin as our target, and we can see that our descending node will be here. So we're going to need to burn normal up over this way. Ever so slightly. There we go. That'll do the trick. We'll align for that. And it was a pleasure, Laythe. We're out of here. So we're aligned, and let's go. That immediately started warping far faster than I thought it was going to, but there goes Joule. Cool. So this is going to be about another 2-year time warp until we get to this point, and then we're going to have to line up our Kerbin interaction. That's going to be interesting. We'll see how we get that done. We've got about 2,500 meters per second, 2,400, well, 2,300 by the time we're done with this. 2,300 meters per second to do it with, and I think that's doable. We saw it was about 1,500 meters per second to get to the Kerbin orbit, at least from, like, over here. We may be more efficient to do it from the apoapsis. In fact, we probably would be. We would have to try to figure out where Kerbin is in its orbit, though. We have not done anything remotely similar to that. So that'll be interesting. This is going to be a pretty lengthy warp again. About another 2 years to go here. But that's the fun of working with Joule. And once we get to our apoapsis here, that's where we're going to start trying to find an encounter. Hopefully we can find one fairly easily. We're very, very far out, so it should be a possibility. It's just past the 2-year mark on that time warp. Exciting. Well, it's going to be a bit. Yeah, about another 1 year and 300 days. I mean, it was a pretty lengthy time to go out here too, but we could start thinking about our apoapsis out here and putting in a maneuver here. I mean, this would be a hypothetical maneuver that I'm going to delete eventually, but for the purposes of testing, what does this end up looking like? Okay. Not too shabby, all things considered. I mean, this isn't going to be exactly where it's going to be, but yeah, that looks pretty doable. Cool. And while we're doing that, I should probably look up like an image of the Parker Solar Probe. I don't actually know what the thing looks like. Okay. It's got the gold foil. It's got... These are probably radiator panels. I'm guessing these are those solar panels? I don't know. And yeah, I know that you guys can't see this right now. We'll take a look at that once we start actually constructing a probe, and we'll just try to do something fairly similar to it. They have to worry a lot about like direct sunlight and plasma flow going to the solar panels and things like that I don't think we have to worry about, but temperature will be a concern, that's for sure. Okay. So we're about 300 days away here. We've gotten most of the way through this time warp. And this is only going to be a 9-second burn here. I wonder if Jeb and Bill have any hope of reaching home at this point. They've been at this for 5 years, for the record. 5 years Jeb and Bill have been out here. just stuck in their chair with nowhere to go. I'm sure they're very happy with their lot in life. So that's Kerbal over there, of course, and our energy flow isn't high, but it doesn't have to be to keep us going here. We need very little energy to keep this space plane going. $100 days to go. $60 days to go. It's the fastest we can time warp. 40, 30, 20, 10, and we're here. Fantastic. I'm going to call this close enough for the inclination change. I'm not going to bother warping the extra minute forward. And let's get that change done. There we go. All good. And that's 0.0 degrees. So let's grab at the apoapsis here. That's 4 years out. We're going to bring this on down. And let's see what we've got for timing here. Okay, so we're going to have to change when this burn occurs, and I'd rather have it be sooner. Okay, we're going to need to focus Kerbin at this point. So let's go ahead and do so. What do we got? What's this encounter look like? There isn't... Oh, there's not quite an encounter? There's not quite an encounter there. Okay, so we're going to have to move that a wee bit to be about here. And... sure. We'll bring that in slightly. Okay, I'd like to bring it in further. Periapsis of... Okay, we need to change the normal here quite a bit. Okay, that's going down. Looks good. 1.7 kilometers. That was a little more than I wanted. 100 kilometers? Not exactly equatorial, but it doesn't have to be. But we can bring it down like this, just barely dipping into the atmosphere to use it as a bit of aerobraking. That's pretty close to equatorial, actually. 50 kilometers? We'll probably have to tweak that after this burn. But 50 kilometers isn't so bad. And then we can come in retrograde and aerobrake and bring that down to around an apoapsis of probably like 70 kilometers or so. And then from there, we'd be able to do our final approach. I wouldn't want this to be our final approach. Okay, so this is going to be a 4-year time warp. Well, we're off, and I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go on a break here, go grab a drink, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes here. I'll just leave this up, and I highly recommend that you also go grab a drink. This is going to be exciting. I'll be back in a bit.